It's not time.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Amusement Adventures, the series where I document my day at a park, reviewing the rides I rode, the food I ate, and even the journey to get there. I will cover it all. And in this episode, we are once again going to Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California. The park that started from a simple berry stand and organically grew to the amazing theme park it is today. If you want to learn more about the fascinating history of this park, I would recommend watching my first episode of Amusement Adventures, where I go into greater detail about the history of this incredibly charming park. But for now, I had to wake up my cousin so we could both get ready for the awesome day that was to come.
Awake now?
After succeeding at waking up my cousin, I did my usual morning routine, consisting of taking a shower,
That transition was as smooth as this SLC, bro.
and brushing my teeth. And I already knew Accelerator and Montezuma's Revenge would be the coasters closed today, as Accelerator had been down for months, and Knott's is working hard on turning Montezuma into this. But now that everything was taken care of, it was once again time to slip on my sandals and step outside.
Wait, you're not supposed to be outside yet. What? Cosmic Dance. Would you say it's currently a nice morning? Sure. Good answer.
Good answer indeed. Any morning going to a theme park is a lovely one. But how would we get there? You see, my cousin Cosmic could not drive us because he is just old enough to legally drive us both in his home state of Missouri, but not old enough to drive us both in California. So, our grandparents were taking us instead, because they're just awesome like that. And now that we had everyone together, it was time to get into the car and begin our journey to the park. Starbucks for a quick bite to eat before continuing on toward our destination. Past Disneyland on our way there.
Guys, it's Disneyland! It's Disneyland, guys! Disneyland. Look, it's Disneyland!
pulling into Buena Park and the Knott skyline appeared on the horizon. As you can see, Cosmic was very excited. And once we had the car parked, we walked through the marketplace into the park itself. After walking through the entrance, we walked straight to Ghost Rider to make it our first ride of the day. But we didn't walk through the regular queue. You see, because I got a bring a friend free ticket when I renewed my pass, Cosmic and I were both getting in without having to buy a ticket. So since we did not have to pay for the ticket, I decided to buy Fast Lane for the both of us that day. So instead of going through Ghost Rider's regular queue, we went up the Fast Lane queue. However, we were not the only ones about to ride Ghost Rider. This is Gerstlauer the Coaster Cone. You may remember him from his introduction in the first episode of Zero Credits and Counting. In that episode, we said we would take him on a roller coaster, and we were gonna stick to that promise. And Gerstlauer was not just going to ride Ghost Rider. Oh no. Gerstlauer is going to ride all the coasters. He is destined to have the highest credit count of any pinecone alive. But for now, he needed his first credit. So we hopped on Ghost Rider and enjoyed one of the wildest rides in the West. If you want to see my full in-depth thoughts on Ghost Rider, make sure to check out my first Amusement Adventures episode. After getting off Ghost Rider, we walked down the exit path, thinking about the insane ride we just experienced.
Ghost Rider, what's your first reaction to
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
Would ride multiple times over.
We're going to ride it multiple times. We're going to. Yeah, but on to the next ride.
And the next ride we would ride would be one of the most intense family coasters of all time, Sierra Sidewinder. Sierra Sidewinder's queue is pretty nice. It's shaded and has some decent looking landscaping, as well as some really good views of the coaster, but me and my cousin did not have to wait to walk through the queue due to our previously mentioned FastPass, so we walked right on to the back row of Sierra Sidewinder. The ride begins with a right-hand turn out of the station into the lift hill, which you will ascend either forwards or backwards depending on the row you sat in. But none of that really matters once you crest the lift hill, as you'll almost immediately start spinning. The ride does not really begin with a drop, it starts instead with an elevated helix that descends to the ground. But this shape is actually better in my opinion than a traditional drop, because it causes quite a lot of spinning, which really accentuates the ride's elements. Speaking of elements, the next one is more of a traditional drop the rest of the way down to the ground. You then go into a high bank turn, getting some good spinning, before descending back down to the ground, traversing a very low to the ground helix. You get some spinning, and if you're on the side facing the ground, it seriously feels like your face is about to be brutally scraped across the rocks. This helix also pulls some pretty significant positive Gs for a family coaster. It would be intense even without the spinning, but with it there, the ride's intensity is increased dramatically, to the point where I honestly think this ride might be a little bit much for its target audience. The next element is a little S-curve that gives some laterals and puts some real nice spin on the trains. The ride then finishes off with a couple more helix-like turns with good spinning and positives before hitting the brake run. This ride is truly great. It has strong positives, intense spinning, and really nice landscaping throughout, which is a plus. However, the Camp Snoopy location is deceiving, as this ride is very intense, and young riders may find it to be a bit too much. However, I love this ride's intensity, so I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. My second favorite family coaster of all time, after the wonderful Manta. It seems like mock rides, or mac and cheese rides as me and Cosmic like to call it.
Or mock.
Mac and cheese.
Mac and cheese.
Just make really good family coasters. Now, I love Sierra Sidewinder, but what did my friend Gerstlauer the Coaster Cone think of the ride?
So we just got off Sierra Sidewinder, and I wanted to ask Gerstlauer what his Gerstlauer right here, what his opinions are of the ride. So what's your first reaction? Good? Gerstlauer thinks it's good. Gerstlauer thinks it's good.
And after Gerstlauer's shockingly eloquent review of the ride, we decided to visit the other coaster in Camp Snoopy. Now, I'm a fan of coasters. I love them. But honestly, I was really quite nervous to ride this ride. This ride is a legend. It's said to be so intense that you don't just gray out, you red out, with ejector airtime so strong that Alan Schilke himself refuses to ride. Let's just say me and Cosmic were absolutely shivering in our timbers to get on this ride. The ride in question? Timberline Twister. While we were quite nervous to get on this beast of a coaster, we noticed something in line that distracted us from the terrifying prospect of riding this coaster. pine cones scattered around the layout.
It's Gerstlauer's cousin. Gerstlauer's cousin, guys.
Indeed, these were Gerstlauer's distant cousins. The reunion of the family was joyous. The pine cones encouraged Gerstlauer to go on the terrifying coaster. So even though he was just as scared as we were, he decided to go on the ride. Gerstlauer's courage deeply inspired me and Cosmic. So, with reluctance, we stepped on the ride. Timberline Twister really does live up to its legend. It's insane. Every single hill gives wild ejector airtime. I literally flew out of my seat and landed in a nearby field. The positives were crazy. I was pushed so far into my seat that I shrunk by a full 10 inches. This ride is excellent, but it's also insanely terrifying. I give it a Googleplex out of 10. However, this ride is so intense and terrifying that I swore never to ride it again.
So scary. This is so scary. Never again.
After braving Timberline Twister, we walked around the corner of Camp Snoopy and past the closed Montezuma's Revenge into Fiesta Village. Looming over Fiesta Village is the impressive and mysterious Mayan temple, housing the queue for Jaguar, which we decided to make our next ride. After the insanity of Timberline Twister, a more relaxed family coaster was exactly what we needed. So, we walked under the entrance into the Forbidden Temple. Jaguar was a walk-on, so we decided to go through the regular queue so Cosmic could see all the incredible theming this queue has to offer. The first large room has tons of pillars, with Mayan carvings and paintings all over the walls, and the winding ramp up to the ride station is dark and has some really neat statues. The station itself is also really nicely themed, with large carved pillars and bright-colored tiles. The trains for the ride look really nice as well. The lead car has a Mayan statue carved into the front, and the rest of the trains have a really cool design. They aren't the most comfortable trains in the world, though. They are 100% fiberglass, with zero padding. You also share a lap bar with the person sitting next to you. But once we got situated into these trains, we began our ride on Jaguar. Jaguar starts out with a tire drive lift hill into the ride's first drop. The shallow drop banks to the left and ascends into a helix elevated above the ride's entrance. The helix gives some great views of the fountains outside the entrance, and really, this whole ride is quite scenic as you fly above Fiesta Village. After this helix, you fly through the temple, getting a really nice head/hand chopper effect. You then traverse some straight track that slopes slightly downward before turning into a section of track that normally passes through Montezuma's Loop. But not currently, as the loop, well, it's not there, as it will be replaced as part of the mega refurbishment they're doing right now. The train then travels through some twists and turns through the trees before braking and ascending the ride's second lift hill. Once at the top, you go through a left-hand turn before shallowly descending, gaining speed as you go. This isn't really a drop, it's more of a ramp, giving you enough speed to finish the ride. After this slow descent, the train traverses an elongated camelback, and it does offer a weak bit of a floaty sensation. The camelback leads into a wide sweeping turn that flies through some trees before traversing a sort of S-bend into a helix. This helix has a kind of airtime hill in the middle, but it only gives a little pop of floater. This helix then transitions into the brakes, ending your ride. Jaguar is a very good family coaster. It's not very intense, and it offers lovely views of the park. Some of the elements can slam you into the side of the fiberglass trains, but overall this ride is quite comfortable. Jaguar is a very solid addition to Knott's lineup, but I'm definitely not this ride's target audience. Overall, Jaguar scores a 6 out of 10. And after our relaxing ride through the ruins of Jaguar, we decided to leave Fiesta Village. And as we were leaving, we saw Silver Bullet fly overhead.
That's not a drop. I mean, maybe afterwards.
So, of course, we decided to make it our next ride. Silver Bullet had a nice entrance. The queue itself is quite bare though. It's mainly just a staircase up to the station. The station has a nice facade on the outside, and it looks nice enough on the inside. After waiting 0 minutes because Fast Pass, and the ride was nearly a walk-on anyway, we walked through the air gates and boarded Silver Bullet. The ride starts off with a right-hand turn before ascending up the lift hill. Once it reaches the top of the ride, it goes into a pre-drop before going down the actual drop, if you can call it that. It's more of a ramp that allows you to pick up speed. It's not as gut-wrenching as the Batman clones, but it's still fun and it gives a weak floaty sensation. The bottom of the drop going into the loop gives good positives, and the loop itself does offer some whip in the back. It kind of feels like it stalls at the top in the first half before violently pulling you back down in the second half, giving good positives on the exit. The next element is this high-banked turn. It's almost like an overbanked wave turn. It's very floaty, and I love how unique it is. The valley of this element gives some great positives as you zoom into the next element, the cobra roll. Now, this cobra roll is actually quite nice. It snaps you through the two inversions, especially the second one as you dive back down to the ground. Once again, getting great positives and zooming past the ride's photo op. You then fly through a whippy 0G roll before traversing a high-speed turn over the midway into the first of two corkscrews. This corkscrew has some nice whip to it, though it could be a little whippier. The train then travels through what is essentially a smaller, more compact version of the high bank turn from earlier. This element adds some really nice flair to the ride, and it is a great transition into the second corkscrew, which is in my opinion just a little better than the first. The second corkscrew transitions into the ride's most intense element, the helix. This helix piles on the positive G's, and all the blood in your body rushes to your feet. It feels like your legs are about to be ripped off, in a good way. And this helix lasts for a total of 5 seconds, which on a coaster is a very long time. This helix then transitions smoothly into the final brakes, ending your ride on Silver Bullet. Silver Bullet is a very enjoyable coaster with some intense elements. In fact, on this particular visit, it was running more intense than I have ever felt it run in the past. Overall, Silver Bullet scores an 8 out of 10, a very unique coaster with some very thrilling elements. But Cosmic's ranking of this ride was a little higher than mine, as he instantly declared this his favorite roller coaster. But on the note of coasters, we decided to take a little break from coasters to get wet. So we headed over to my favorite river rapids of all time, Calico River Rapids, for a splashing adventure. If you want to see my full thoughts on this attraction, make sure to check out my first Amusement Adventures episode from Nods. Our ride on Calico River Rapids was great, and we definitely got wet. And since we were already wet, we decided we would walk the short distance to the famous Timber Mountain Log Ride. The Timber Mountain Log Ride slimly has my favorite queue in the whole park, just barely beating out Calico River Rapids. It weaves in and out of rockwork, waterfalls, a cave, and even under the flume itself, all the while the most wonderful song plays.
Howdy, all you lumberjacks, prepare to take a ride straight through Timber Mountain and along the Great Divide.
Sadly in some ways, but not so sad in others, we did not wait in this queue. Instead, we hopped in the fast lane entrance and got right on the best log ride I have ever ridden. Timber Mountain starts off with a lift hill into the first set piece, the sawmill. Inside are a bunch of animatronic figures working on processing wood and singing about the upcoming Loggers Hootenanny. You see, the story for this ride is that you are riding in a logger's log flume to get to the upcoming Loggers Hootenanny. This first room is brimming with excitement and full of wonderful detail. After the sawmill, you take a slight dip into the first outdoor flume section. This section hugs the side of the mountain and peacefully flows through the water. After this peaceful flume section, you go into the next show scene. This scene is also full of detail. You have a man playing banjo on the porch of his cabin, a man cutting down a tree, and a donkey. It's so much eye candy, and there is something new to see every time. You then go through an outdoor flume section with an equal amount of eye candy before going into another slow, peaceful flume section. You then enter a dark and spooky cave that hides a surprise drop in the dark. This is one of my favorite parts of the ride. Whenever I ride this with someone who has never ridden it, I always make sure not to tell them about this drop, because I remember just how insanely terrifying I felt when I first embarked on my journey to the Hootenanny. Even though I know it's coming, it still catches me off guard because it's just so dark in there. This drop leads to a cave that skirts the edge of the ride's reservoir that holds and filters all the ride's water. You'll see a spelunker as well as encounter some bats before moving on back into the forest, encountering a wolf and a hermit who's having a bit of trouble with the local wildlife. And finally, after making your way past a mountain lion, you have made your way to the Loggers Hootenanny. This room is full of incredible animatronics, and in my opinion, it's the best show scene of the entire ride. There are all these loggers partying. It's really something special. You then begin to ascend the ride's final lift hill where blasting work is being done up ahead, but it's too late. There is now no way out of the mountain but to drop down the 42-foot drop into the final splashdown. This drop is not the steepest, but it does give a nice sense of speed, and the final splashdown is a real soaker. After this final plunge, all that's left is a final right-hand turn into the station, and that concludes your ride experience on Timber Mountain Log Ride. The log ride is absolutely iconic, and it deserves all the praise it gets. This ride is easily a 9 out of 10, nearly perfect in every way, and an absolutely must-ride at Knott's Berry Farm. After being thoroughly soaked from our rides on Timber Mountain Log Ride and Calico River Rapids, we decided to go right across the midway from Timber Mountain Log Ride to experience the final of what I like to call the Calico Trio, the Calico Mine Ride. Mine Ride has a pretty decent queue. It's similar to the log ride as it's mostly hidden behind the rockwork. But when we went up the fast lane entrance and while we were waiting to board the ride, we saw something interesting.
So we just saw a possum on Calico Mine Ride's track. It was just over there. You don't see it, but it just went inside. Gerstlauer, what do you think about that? Yeah, that's pretty crazy, huh?
And after that interesting sight, we hopped right onto the train and began our journey into the mine. The Calico Mine Ride is incredible. It's almost like a Western Pirates of the Caribbean in the sense that it's a long ride and it's really more about the scenery than anything else. There are incredible details everywhere you look. The Glory Hole is one of the most impressive set pieces I have ever seen in a dark ride. The ride story is also really interesting and engaging. I'm just also a massive fan of this ride's history. Overall, this ride is so charming and tranquil. Well, at least it usually is. You see, me and Cosmic got super unlucky with the people in our train. They were literally screaming at the top of their lungs around every corner, especially up that clackety lift hill. This got annoying real fast and kinda spoiled the peaceful vibe of the ride. But that is absolutely not the fault of the ride itself, which scores an 8 out of 10, one of the best dark rides ever built. After our annoyingly loud ride on the Calico Mine Ride, we were hankering to get a little grub, so we met up with our grandparents and went to get lunch at Wilderness Broiler. Me and Cosmic both got the cowboy brisket fries, and holy cow, these were so good. They were fries topped with super tender brisket, corn salsa, fresh jalapenos, and this creamy chipotle sauce. It was amazing, but it was also really hot, so if spice is not your thing, this meal is not for you. I give the brisket fries a 9 out of 10, incredibly good and definitely something I would get again. Once we finished our meal at Wilderness Broiler, we decided to let our stomach settle and keep the dark ride train going. So we went over to Berry Tales, returned to the fair, where I proceeded to absolutely destroy Cosmic.
Get destroyed!
If you want to see my more in-depth thoughts about Berry Tales, go ahead and check out my first episode of Amusement Adventures. After we had let our stomachs settle on the calm dark ride that is Berry Tales, we wanted to get back into the coaster game. And since Cosmic and Gerstlauer both needed the credit, I begrudgingly hopped on to one of my least favorite coasters of all time, Coast Rider. Coast Rider has a very plain queue. Luckily, we did not have to wait in this queue because this ride is not worth the wait of more than 5 minutes. Coast Rider's layout itself is fine. It has some okay laterals, but it's trimmed to heck, so it's mostly really boring. The issue with this coaster is the restraints. Shortly after this ride opened, someone tried to climb out of the car while it was moving, so Knott's had to add these awful shin guards to the ride. Now anyone with even mildly long legs is going to have these horrid shin guards jamming into their shins the entire ride. The ride begins with a turn out of the station before ascending up the lift hill, then turning right and dropping into a shallow drop before rising back up into the unbanked turn section of the ride. Each turn has a trim before it, slowing you down, so the laterals are greatly reduced. There are still some, but it's not nearly as forceful as some other wild mice. And the rest of the ride is pretty much just these turns, slowly descending to the ground until you hit the brakes. At this point, the pain in your shins is probably so unbearable, and you most likely can't wait to get off the ride. But sadly, you will most likely have to. You see, this ride will often stack trains on the brake run, meaning you will just sit there in pain until the train finally enters the station and your lap bar lifts up, finally giving your poor shins some relief. This coaster is not good, as you can see by me and Cosmic's reactions. After me and Cosmic's disappointingly awful ride on Coast Rider, we decided to head right across the midway to a coaster that is the opposite of garbage. Hangtime. Hangtime's queue is mostly just switchbacks, but there are some palm trees and some beach theming. The entire queue is also really nicely shaded. Hangtime's restraints are the opposite of Coast Rider's. They are incredibly comfortable. The ride begins with a bang, ascending the vertical lift hill. Going up this lift hill with the lap bar restraints is honestly a little freaky. It feels like you're gonna slip out, even though that's impossible. Once you reach the top, the ride stops you with a holding brake over the 122-foot drop. This element is awesome. It really adds to the anticipation of the drop, and it gives you time to take in the awesome views this ride provides. After about 8 seconds, the brakes release and you plummet down the 96-degree beyond vertical drop into the ride. In the back, this drop gives some incredible ejector airtime that lasts until the train hits the valley, which gives fantastic positives. You then rise into a hill that twists into a dive drop, and in the back, the dive drop gives some insane laterals as you plummet back down to the earth. The next element is what Knott's likes to call a -G stall loop. This looks almost like a sidewinder that's elongated at the top. This element gives wicked hang time. Funnily enough, it's honestly one of the only moments of hang time on a Hangtime, but it is awesome. After the -G stall loop, you careen into an oddly shaped corkscrew. It's like if you take a regular corkscrew and then stretch it out upwards. It's the only element of the ride that some people might consider rough, as there is a slight shuffle at the top, but the rest of the ride is absolutely glass smooth. After the corkscrew, you go into what Knott's considers a cutback inversion. This feels more like an overbank than an inversion, but it is bank steep enough that I think it counts as an inversion. This element gives faint hang time, but nothing much else. The same, however, cannot be said about the next element. This is a little dip after the cutback, and this little drop down, especially in the back, gives some absolutely wild ejector airtime. This is 100% my favorite moment on the ride, and I think it's top 3 for the best airtime moments in the park, with Ghost Rider's drop off the mid-course and Accelerator's top hat. After the drop down, you head into the final 2 inversions in the Cobra Roll. This Cobra Roll is a little snappier than the one in Silver Bullet, and the valley coming out of this Cobra Roll gives the best positives on the ride, because it's so tight. The ride then concludes with a final pop-up into the brakes, providing one last pop of ejector to everyone in the train. Hang time is excellent. The vertical lift and the holding brake kick off the ride with a bang, and its compact set of inversions with the occasional airtime moment really make this ride the perfect fit for Knott's. Hang time scores an 8 out of 10.
So hang time over there was Gerstlauer's first Gerstlauer. So he finally got a Gerstlauer credit. So that's pretty sick.
After hang time, we only had one open coaster in the park left to ride, and that was the legendary Pony Express. So we walked over to the Calico River territory to get a ride on this wild family launch coaster. Pony Express's queue is really just one long ramp up to the station. The station itself looks nice, and the trains for this ride might be the most interesting part. You literally straddle the seat like a horse. It's a very interesting feeling on a coaster. To me, it feels very open, and I find it quite comfortable, but I know others who find these trains very uncomfortable. The ride starts off with a flywheel launch. This launch actually has a little punch to it, more than you would expect from a family coaster, and I think it's my favorite part of the ride. After the launch comes a turnaround that doesn't really have any forces, but it does kind of feel cool with the openness of the trains. You then travel through an elongated airtime hill that gives faint floater. After this hill, you fly through a switchback airtime hill that again gives some faint floater. The train then crosses over Calico River Rapids, giving some really cool interaction, before going through a tight turnaround in an enclosed bridge structure, giving a cool head chopper effect and popping up into the brakes, ending your ride on Pony Express. Yep, that's it. One of my few complaints with Pony Express is its length. I just wish it did one more lap before ending. I know it was probably all the space Knott's had, but it would have been cool if it was a little longer. Other than that, it's a really good family coaster, and it's a fantastic beginner launch coaster that fits perfectly with Ghost Town. Pony Express gets a 7 out of 10, and that was it as far as new credits for Cosmic and Gerstlauer. The rest of the day was mainly spent getting re-rides on the amazing coasters Ghost Rider, Hangtime, and Silver Bullet. We also took a ride on Supreme Scream, a really fun S&S drop tower with a nice pop of airtime on the drop, and some fantastic views of the park and Southern California. Supreme Scream scores a 7 out of 10, and once again we were craving some delectable food. First, Cosmic got a muffin from Ghost Town Bakery.
It's a good muffin.
And then we went to Fireman's Barbecue and got some ribs and corn on the cob. These were honestly some incredible ribs. They were fall off the bone tender and were so smoky, and the corn was sweet and it definitely had the juice. This meal gets a 9 out of 10. Once we finished dinner, we walked around Ghost Town for a bit and did some shopping, and as night began to fall over Ghost Town, we had an idea. we were going to ride Ghost Rider as many times as we possibly could until the park closed.
Third. And dude, it's like a light shark.
Yeah.
And after ending with a total of 6 back-to-back rides on Ghost Rider, the park was officially closed. We walked out the turnstiles and back to the Knott's Berry Farm Hotel where we were spending the night, ending another wonderful day at the farm. Thank you all so much for watching another episode of Amusement Adventures. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to check out my other Amusement Adventures episodes. And if you want more of me and Cosmic, check out my new series, 0 Credits and Counting, where Cosmic is a co-host. Make sure to stay tuned because I have some awesome videos coming up. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.